8 of my classmates, friends really, in school and college, were killed in World War II. I've had 60 years of life that those 8 friends never had. We call this a civilization? More than 5,200 American men and women, kids really, have been killed in Iraq and Afghanistan. Maybe a small number in 2 small wars, but if you're one of those killed, or even a father or mother of one of them, there's nothing small about it. Why not, instead of commemorating Veterans Day, we establish and work on what we could call a No War Day? The name doesn't have much of a ring to it, but a day like that would be worth celebrating.
War is something most people don't desire, don't feel is an absolute. Others, mostly those who believe the world has to bend to their will, of course always believe subjugating others with brutal force and wanton killing is easy and often justified. Therein lies the paradox of this day. It is on this day and every Veterans Day those remaining who were there and those who took part in similar events on similar days need to be more than just remembered by words from commentators such as myself, much more than just discussed by experts and historians. You see, we have to remember their stories.
Claude Schul was the last known surviving World War I veteran and Australia's oldest man. He was also the last known living person to have fought in both World Wars. Schul, who was born in Britain, joined the British Royal Navy when he was a teenager. He fought in the Great War and, according to the Australian Navy, witnessed the surrender of the German Imperial Navy in 1918.
Your local guy really made a big impression here in Washington today. Out there with the president at Arlington National Cemetery, the president referring repeatedly to Richard Overton, the 107-year-old World War II veteran. The president basically telling Mr. Overton's story, that Overton was at Pearl Harbor while the warships sunk by the Japanese were still smoldering, that he went to Okinawa, that he was on hand at Iwo Jima, told the president that he only got out of there by the grace of God.
I guess I feel very lucky. I was one of them that got to come home and have a life. And I had a very understanding family that put up with a lot when I first got home. If I lay down on the floor, or like when we first got married, you didn't dare touch me, because I'd just come unglued, because they had a bayonet in our back all the time when they were marching us. And I guess it took a long time to get over it. And I couldn't talk about this for years.
At the time I got there, I was the 72nd American captured in North Vietnam. And there were some of them in 2-man cells, but an awful lot of us were in single cells, kept in isolation. I spent 13 months in solitary confinement. The treatment varied considerably from downright brutal torture to sometimes not quite so bad.
And I just remember getting tapped, you know, from above, from the troop hatch where Major Toland was sitting, said, "Hey, we're in the next vehicle, we're not in this track." I remember getting up, walking off the end of the ramp and looking back at those guys and being like, "Hey, I'll catch you on the flip side."
Shortly afterwards, the original vehicle drove over an enormous buried bomb. 7 years later, Williams is still trying to come to terms with what happened that day and how to move on with his life.
I feel like of all the people that were killed in that explosion, I shouldn't have been the guy that was pulled out in the morning.
Those are only a few stories. So do the men and women who gave their lives, their time, and sometimes their souls. Never forget is more than just hollow words for many of us. They are the words of promise, always followed by a very simple, and we hope very heartfelt, thank you for your service. And perhaps this day, let us also thank their families, for they too also serve. They feel the pride, they suffer the anguish that we can only talk about, never experience, but just try to think about what it was like. And that is telling it like it is. And thank you for your service. Next hour here on MIdPoint, have we reached time where the NRA needs to be doing more about gun safety instead of just falling back on cliches, and why net neutrality is a subject that will hit you square in the wallet? That and so much more as MIdPoint continues.